It was supposed to be a quiet weekend at my mountain cabin. I had just settled in with the fire crackling and coffee steaming when a knock came at the door. Standing there was her, the notorious HOA Karen, clipboard in hand, eyes sharp like she was ready to find me for breathing too loud. She launched into a tirade about how this cabin isn't registered under our HOA and you'll need to vacate immediately before I call the authorities. I calmly explained that I wasn't under their HOA rules at all, but she wasn't listening. Her voice grew shrill as she threatened, "I'll have the sheriff remove you myself." Then, sure enough, she dialed 911. Within minutes, 2 deputies pulled up. Karen practically sprinted to them, declaring I was trespassing. The officers turned to me and asked for proof of ownership. With a small smile, I handed them the deed, not just to the cabin, but to the entire county. The deputies stifled grins and Karen's face drained of color. Her self-appointed authority evaporated as they explained the reality. "Ma'am, this man owns the land your HOA sits on." She stuttered, tried to argue, but it was over. The sheriff later told me she went quiet at every HOA meeting after that. As for me, I sat back on the porch with my coffee, enjoying the peace, knowing sometimes the best way to silence arrogance is with truth backed by ownership.
Entitlement is one of those subtle yet powerful forces that can disrupt communities, workplaces, and personal interactions. It often shows up in the form of individuals who believe they have authority over situations or people where they do not. In the story of the HOA Karen, the conflict began not because there was a real legal issue, but because one person assumed a sense of control beyond her actual jurisdiction. This mindset of entitlement is not unique to neighborhood associations. It is a human behavior pattern that repeats in many parts of life. Understanding why entitlement develops and how reality can bring it back into balance is an important lesson for anyone interested in leadership, community building, or simply maintaining healthy relationships. At its core, entitlement thrives on perception rather than truth. Someone like Karen may genuinely believe that her position in the HOA grants her the authority to police cabins, dictate rules, or call for enforcement when others don't comply. In her mind, her power feels real, but it is built on the assumption that others will not challenge her. When people act from entitlement, they often rely on others' silence or ignorance. This is why HOA disputes, workplace overreach, or even interpersonal conflicts can escalate so quickly. The entitled individual assumes control, and unless someone pushes back with facts and boundaries, they continue operating unchecked. The reality, however, is that entitlement has no lasting foundation if it is not supported by truth. In the cabin story, the deed to the land and county ownership stripped Karen's entitlement of its force. What she thought was authority crumbled the moment it was measured against actual reality. This clash between perception and fact is a critical moment in any situation involving entitlement. It highlights that no matter how strong someone's voice may be, the truth always has the ability to bring balance. Entitlement may feel powerful in the moment, but reality has the final say. From an educational perspective, this teaches us about power dynamics. True authority is grounded in responsibility, ownership, and legitimacy. False authority, which is what entitlement represents, is built on ego, fear, and control. While false authority can cause temporary disruption, it rarely survives when questioned with evidence or legal standing. This is why it is important for individuals in any setting to not only know their rights and responsibilities, but also to remain calm when those rights are challenged. Losing composure often feeds entitlement, while calm confidence backed by truth dismantles it. It is also important to recognize that entitlement is not always malicious. Sometimes it develops out of misunderstanding, insecurity, or even overzealous commitment to rules. Karen, in her role, may have thought she was protecting community standards. However, when that sense of duty crosses into territory that is not her own, it becomes damaging. Education around boundaries, the scope of authority, and respect for ownership can prevent these conflicts before they start. Communities that clearly define roles and responsibilities reduce the space where entitlement can thrive. Another key aspect of entitlement is that it tends to grow in environments where accountability is weak. People who are never questioned, corrected, or asked to prove their claims can develop an inflated sense of power. This is why accountability systems, whether in organizations, communities, or personal relationships, are essential. Just as the deed provided accountability in the story, documentation, transparency, and clear communication provide accountability in other aspects of life. They transform disputes into learning moments by grounding discussions in fact rather than assumption. Ultimately, entitlement versus reality is a lesson in humility. When someone acts entitled, they risk embarrassment or even legal consequences once truth comes to light. On the other hand, those who respect boundaries, honor ownership, and acknowledge the limits of their authority gain genuine respect. The HOA Karen story illustrates this perfectly. Entitlement may shout loudly, but reality speaks more powerfully and permanently. For anyone navigating authority, influence, or conflict, the takeaway is simple. Build your sense of control on truth, not assumption. And when faced with entitlement, remember that calm clarity and ownership will always outweigh empty noise.
Ownership is more than the simple act of holding a title or possessing property. It is a mindset and a responsibility that influences how people behave and interact with others. In the story, where the cabin owner reveals that he not only owns his cabin, but the entire county, the dramatic reversal of authority was not just about land deeds or legal paperwork. It was a lesson in what ownership truly represents. While entitlement, as seen in the behavior of the HOA Karen, is based on assumed authority without real foundation, ownership represents grounded authority, responsibility, and the ability to create order where others seek control. Understanding the deeper meaning of ownership allows us to appreciate its power, not just in legal or financial terms, but also in personal growth, leadership, and community development. True ownership is always tied to responsibility. When someone owns something, be it a piece of land, a business, or even a personal decision, they are also accountable for its care and outcomes. The cabin owner in the story had the legal right to occupy his property, but because he owned the broader county as well, he bore a responsibility that extended far beyond himself. That ownership carried weight not only in legal terms, but also in the expectations of stewardship. In contrast, Karen's attempt to exert control reflected authority without responsibility, which is why her demands collapsed under the weight of reality. Ownership creates stability, while false control leads to disorder. In everyday life, ownership can be applied far beyond property. Taking ownership of one's choices, work, and actions is what separates those who grow from those who stagnate. When people avoid accountability and instead blame others, they fall into the same trap of false authority as Karen, trying to exert influence without a foundation. Those who embrace ownership, however, gain influence naturally because others can trust their consistency and integrity. A manager who takes ownership of mistakes earns respect, while one who shifts blame loses credibility. A community member who cares for their property responsibly strengthens the neighborhood, while one who polices others without authority weakens trust. The difference lies in whether someone chooses ownership or entitlement. Ownership also empowers people to stand their ground when challenged. In the story, the moment the deed was presented, the balance of power shifted entirely. It was not about who could speak louder or threaten more forcefully. It was about who had the undeniable foundation of truth. This illustrates a broader principle. When individuals know what they own, whether legally, emotionally, or professionally, they can remain calm under pressure. Their confidence comes not from intimidation, but from reality. This kind of ownership creates a sense of security that entitlement can never achieve.
Educationally, the concept of ownership teaches us about leadership and influence. Leaders who embody ownership do not need to constantly assert their authority. It is evident in their actions, consistency, and accountability. Their teams or communities follow them not out of fear, but out of respect. On the other hand, leaders who operate from entitlement may demand compliance, but their influence erodes quickly when challenged. Ownership as a principle fosters sustainability in leadership because it ties authority directly to responsibility and truth. There is also an empowering dimension to ownership that extends into personal development. When someone accepts ownership over their learning, their health, or their relationships, they begin to take deliberate steps towards improvement. They no longer see setbacks as unfair burdens, but as part of their responsibility to overcome. This attitude creates resilience because ownership reframes obstacles as challenges to be managed, rather than injustices to be fought. Just as the cabin owner's legal claims silenced external noise, personal ownership silences excuses and empowers individuals to create the outcomes they desire. In communities and societies, ownership has the power to create order, fairness, and stability. Rules and laws that are built on legitimate ownership protect people from chaos. When property rights, civic responsibilities, and boundaries are respected, people feel secure and are able to thrive. When false authority or entitlement tries to override ownership, conflict arises and systems break down. This is why ownership is central not just in personal disputes, but in the foundation of functioning societies. The story of the cabin owner versus HOA Karen may seem humorous, but it highlights a serious truth. Ownership is the ultimate equalizer. It dismantles false authority and reveals the real structure of power. When individuals embrace ownership in their lives, whether in property, work, or choices, they gain not only rights, but also the deeper respect of others. Ownership teaches us that influence is not something to be demanded, it is something to be earned and protected through responsibility. Where entitlement fails, ownership prevails, and that is the real power behind the concept.
Dealing with conflict calmly is a skill that can transform tense situations into opportunities for resolution, respect, and even personal growth. In the story of the cabin owner and HOA Karen, the situation could have easily escalated into an emotional shouting match. Karen was already angry, threatening, and trying to use authority she did not actually have. In moments like that, it is tempting to meet fire with fire, raising one's voice, arguing aggressively, or responding with equal hostility. However, the cabin owner chose calmness instead. By staying composed and relying on facts rather than emotions, he not only maintained control of the situation, but also demonstrated the strength that calmness provides when conflict arises. This approach is not just effective in disputes with overzealous neighbors, it is a universal principle that can be applied to workplace disagreements, family conflicts, or any setting where tempers may flare. Calmness in conflict begins with emotional regulation. Human beings are wired to respond defensively when they feel threatened, whether the threat is physical, verbal, or emotional. This fight-or-flight instinct often leads to anger, shouting, or withdrawal. While these responses are natural, they rarely solve the problem and often make it worse. Instead, taking a step back, breathing deeply, and keeping emotions in check allows space for clarity. In the cabin story, the owner did not let Karen's raised voice or threats dictate his own reaction. By controlling his emotions, he shifted the power dynamic, showing that he could not be provoked into irrational behavior. This type of composure signals strength and often unsettles those who rely on intimidation. Another key reason calmness is so powerful in conflict is that it allows for logical thinking. When emotions run high, people tend to focus on winning the argument rather than solving the issue. Calmness, on the other hand, keeps attention on facts, solutions, and outcomes. The owner knew he had the deed to the property, and instead of wasting energy on verbal sparring, he simply waited for the moment to present it. This strategic patience made his position unshakable. In any disagreement, the person who keeps a clear mind often has the advantage, because facts are more persuasive when delivered without anger.
Calm communication ensures that the truth is heard without being overshadowed by emotion. Calmness also prevents escalation. Many conflicts spiral out of control not because of the original issue, but because both parties feed off each other's anger. A raised voice leads to shouting, shouting leads to insults, and soon the focus is lost entirely. By refusing to escalate, one party can interrupt this cycle. Calm responses act like water on fire. They cool the heat of the moment. In some cases, the aggressor may even begin to feel embarrassed or reconsider their behavior when met with composure. This is exactly what happened with Karen when the sheriff explained the reality. Her anger dissolved because the situation no longer validated her aggression. From an educational standpoint, staying calm in conflict is not about being passive or avoiding confrontation. It is about maintaining control and creating space for resolution. Assertiveness can be delivered calmly, and in fact, it is often more effective that way. Saying, "I understand your concern, but here are the facts," carries far more weight than shouting back, "You're wrong." Calm assertiveness ensures respect for oneself while also leaving room for the other person to reconsider without feeling humiliated. This is especially important in professional and personal relationships where preserving dignity and respect matters. Practicing calmness in conflict also has long-term benefits. It builds a reputation for reliability and fairness. People who are known for staying composed under pressure become trusted leaders, sought-after mediators, and respected peers. Others feel safer bringing concerns to them because they know the situation will be handled reasonably. On a personal level, calmness reduces stress, improves health, and prevents the emotional exhaustion that constant conflict brings. Over time, it fosters resilience, because the person learns not to be swayed by every provocation, but instead to focus on solutions. In the end, the lesson from the cabin incident is clear. Conflict does not need to be won with louder voices or harsher words. It is often resolved most effectively through calmness, confidence, and reliance on truth. While anger may temporarily intimidate, calmness establishes lasting authority and respect. Whether facing a difficult coworker, a heated family discussion, or a stranger trying to overstep boundaries, the ability to stay calm is a powerful tool. It transforms confrontation into resolution, weakness into strength, and chaos into clarity. Just as the cabin owner showed, calmness is not a lack of response. It is the most powerful response of all.
Turning confrontation into empowerment is a skill that transforms difficult situations into opportunities for growth, confidence, and influence. Many people view confrontation as something inherently negative, an event to be avoided at all costs because it feels uncomfortable, stressful, or even threatening. Yet confrontation is often unavoidable. Whether it happens in personal life, at work, or within communities, people will disagree, boundaries will be tested, and authority will be challenged. The difference between someone who walks away feeling diminished and someone who walks away stronger lies in how the confrontation is handled. The story of the cabin owner dealing with HOA Karen offers a powerful example of this principle. Instead of allowing her hostility to diminish him, he used the situation to establish authority, confirm truth, and gain respect. That moment of conflict became a moment of empowerment, not just for himself, but as a lesson for anyone who faces similar challenges. One of the first steps in turning confrontation into empowerment is understanding that conflict reveals truths about people and situations that might otherwise remain hidden. In the case of Karen, her behavior revealed her reliance on intimidation and assumption rather than authority and fact. The confrontation exposed the weakness in her approach and, in turn, allowed the cabin owner to demonstrate the strength of his position. In everyday life, when someone challenges us unfairly, it often reveals their insecurities, misunderstandings, or over-reliance on control. When viewed this way, confrontation becomes less threatening and more of a chance to clarify truth and reinforce boundaries. Another important aspect of empowerment through confrontation is the choice of response. While it may be tempting to retaliate with equal aggression, empowerment does not come from winning by shouting louder or intimidating more strongly. It comes from holding firm to one's values, facts, and calmness.
By staying composed and presenting the deed to his property, the cabin owner demonstrated empowerment not through anger, but through proof and patience. Similarly, when individuals respond to conflict with clarity and integrity, they not only resolve the issue, but also reinforce their own sense of self-worth. Each successful handling of confrontation adds to personal confidence, creating a cycle where future challenges feel less intimidating. Confrontation also provides an opportunity for growth because it forces people to articulate their positions clearly. When someone pushes against our boundaries, it requires us to define what those boundaries are and why they matter. This process strengthens self-awareness and communication skills. For instance, in the workplace, an employee who is challenged about their decision may use the moment to explain their reasoning more effectively, reinforcing both their authority and their credibility. In relationships, calmly explaining feelings during disagreements builds deeper understanding and respect. In both cases, the confrontation, though uncomfortable, strengthens the foundation moving forward. Empowerment also comes from the reputation built when conflicts are handled well. People who manage confrontation with composure and fairness are remembered as strong, reliable, and trustworthy. Just as the cabin owner earned respect not only from the deputies, but also indirectly within the community, anyone who demonstrates this ability gains influence. Empowerment, then, is not only personal but also relational. It shapes how others perceive us and how much weight our words and actions carry in the future. Finally, confrontation becomes empowering when it is reframed as a tool for establishing long-term respect rather than a battle to be avoided or feared. Avoiding every conflict may seem like the easier path, but it often leads to resentment, weakness, or the erosion of boundaries. Facing confrontation directly, with calmness and truth, ensures that others know where we stand and that our position is not easily undermined. Over time, this habit transforms not just how we see ourselves, but also how others interact with us. The lesson from the cabin story is clear. Empowerment does not come from avoiding confrontation, nor from escalating it with hostility. It comes from using it as a moment to clarify truth, establish authority, and reinforce inner strength. Every time we face conflict with composure and integrity, we walk away more empowered than before. Confrontation, then, is not just a challenge to overcome, but a doorway to growth and influence. It teaches us that strength is not in avoiding battles, but in turning them into stepping stones toward greater confidence and respect.